Good afternoon. Welcome to the Art Basel Miami Beach Salon talk. It's the last one of the day. This talk is about Shen Wei in black, white, and gray. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jeremy Mikolajczak.
You got it.
Thank you. Executive Director and Chief Curator, MDC Museum of Art and Design here in Miami. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here, the last lecture of the day on a very long and busy Basel weekend. It's my esteemed pleasure to be here speaking to you tonight with an amazing artist that I've had the pleasure of working with over the past 2 years, in addition to two very instrumental and helpful counterparts in putting this exhibition together. I oversee the MDC Museum of Art and Design, which is located in downtown Miami. It's located within the historic Freedom Tower, just 2 blocks south of Museum Park. And for the past 2 years, we've been working with Shen Wei to produce his first large-scale museum exhibition of paintings. The exhibition, titled Shen Wei in Black, White, and Gray, is, as I said, the artist's first exhibition that solely focuses on a transitional point in his career, moving from what he's more sort of globally known and recognized as a choreographer to a visual artist and to a painter. He's been painting throughout his entire life. He is formally trained in both painting and choreography. And this is really, it was an amazing opportunity for the museum to have this ability to work with an artist when they're in this transitional period, but also to sort of learn and grow and see this entire transformation. And I can't begin to say how unbelievable it's been to see this journey happen over the past 2 years. And I guess first and foremost, I should introduce my panel here. As I said, I would introduce Shen Wei. Shen Wei is a Chinese-born artist. He currently lives and works out of New York City. He is, as I said, globally known as a choreographer, but also as a visual artist. And he also is was the creative director for the Beijing Olympics and has done various projects both in and outside of museum settings. So please welcome Shen Wei.
Thank you.
To my immediate left is Ling. Ling is a global figure and also a contemporary art Chinese specialist. She is also the director of the Beijing Center for the Arts, so welcome Ling. And also to my far right is Karin Owen. Karin Owen is the curator of the Crow Collection of Asian Art, which is located in Dallas, Texas. She is also a curator who has worked with Shen Wei in the capacity of working with his paintings and actually previewed 3 of the paintings prior to this large format exhibition in coordination with a performance piece that was happening in Dallas. So welcome, Karin. So we're going to start off looking at a couple images prior to, and it was sort of at a point to where we wanted to sort of set the conversation. This conversation is really about Shen Wei, the painter. And it's also a point, too, that we need to give a point of reference of where he is as a choreographer and some of the projects that he's done that has sort of influenced and has set sort of the tone of where he's going now in the visual arts world. As I said, he's been working independently in his studio all his life. It has been a very sort of solitary process, and just now in his career at this sort of cusp, he's really looking to sort of explore that other area and also to sort of branch out and to sort of show the public that there is a totally other side of him. And with that comes an extreme and intense amount of possibility and wonder, but also to this magnificent work that comes out of it. And again, for the first time, as we will carry through the conversation, we'll look at different aspects of how he creates this work, which varies very differently than, say, his choreography, where that's sort of a more sort of public pursuit. So we're going to start off with just 2 images before we get to the paintings. And this piece, and just to sort of set the tone as far as the exhibition at the museum, There are 11 large-scale works that were created specifically for this project. There was also a dance component where there are 2 more opportunities to view that this weekend, and that is considered the 12th work to this exhibition. So the whole exhibition from top to bottom has really sort of come to fruition and really put together a complete project that sort of harmonizes both this sort of visual arts aspect with a secondary support of his choreographed pieces. So the piece that's up on the screen is one of the, I believe this is one of the first pieces you did in the museum?
Not the first one, but it's one of the largest.
So this piece on the screen here is titled Still Moving, and it's from 2011. And it was the process of where you were given free range, as I understand, to the Met, and you had the ability to sort of work with any specific piece, any specific room. So what was it specifically about how you placed this piece in the sense of what you were willing to work with or what you were allowed to work with?
I was invited for doing this first site-specific piece for Met. I chose in this location because I wanted to discovering the way how we see the figure of human bodies from the past to the recent. This piece called Still Moving, and starting with the way how a sense of the lines and of human bodies, of the beauty of human figures, all the way till recent times. And this is a journey from how we view for human bodies, and also involve a lot of movements and qualities.
And there's also there's a reason why we're showing you 2 dance pieces before, and I think they both correlate and sort of seamlessly tie what he's doing on a 2-dimensional surface in a 3-dimensional form. And he's also been a resident artist at the Park Avenue Armory 2 times now.
Yes.
And also has worked with various artists and collaborated, including Ernesto Neto, which was a large installation piece. See if we can get the next image. There we go. So this piece is titled Undivided Divided, which was the same year in 2011, so a very sort of different piece than what was presented at the Met. But again, it starts to really, again, relate and correlate to the more 2-dimensional form. This brings some of the scroll pieces back into the perspective as presented in the Beijing Olympics, but also brings in new elements such as more sort of figurative drawing, using the body to create line and using body to create image. So as you were going through this process, how did this translate? How did you work between the two pieces, given that they were done in sort of the same year, and did they have a relationship to where you are now?
This piece, actually, I started working on this work like about 2 years. This is one you could be seeing as individual pieces or seeing as a unison work. They have each element on the set is like installation, but all the installation has to be finished by a human being. It's about another human being with an object, and it's all talking about a space and the relationship between one human to another object or another human being. And during this show, audience, of course, you can walk around any of the installations. That make another dimension of the connection between the audience and the performers.
So this is 2011, and we're looking at today in 2014. And this series of paintings that you're showing at the museum took roughly about 1.5 to 2 years to create. There's a total of 15 paintings in the exhibition. 11 of them are the large-scale works that relate to this specific project of Shen Wei in black, white, and gray. And was there a point at which, when you created the works, and we'll start flipping through some of the images of the artist's work. This is a picture of Shen Wei in his studio, and I also, too, just want to show the immense scale of the artist's work. This actually shows 4 specific works, one of the largest piece here, which is roughly around 30 feet by 20 feet. What was the thought process when you were going through and creating this body of work?
When I'm making painting, I think it's really personal things. Usually, when I start working at painting, I usually don't let anybody go into my studio I have to go to a really personal zone, and I will lock myself in the studio for a long time, and even preparation for my energy. And it's kind of, you can say it's meditative, but also it's more important is how I being focused spiritually, physically, go to a place that's so personal, but at the same time, really being sensitive and concentrated. When I started working the piece, I have to feel myself completely in the place. So let's say it's not empty, but it's like it's completely in the place that doesn't have any other noise around me. Of course, it should be so quiet. And once I'm in that kind of really clean and concentrate zoom, then I began to paint. And I didn't, usually it's all important things for me starting is how I'm feeling in that time, in that day or that period. All my decisions, starting with work, even pulling painting on the canvas or using brush strokes or using my body parts or hands and fabric, any objects around my studio, I had to be so super concentrate and be sensitive. But usually I don't make sketches, but I will have to follow the day how this feelings flows. And if I'm in that mood, I always, if I focus on one painting, I kind of like an actor or actress are living in that kind of that kind of mood for a long time. And until that piece finish, then I take a break, then I go to another zoom. That's why each painting they have a little difference of my feelings and sensitivities. But also has to be really super concentrated is every drip and every brush stroke and ending and texture things I'm making on the canvas as being really making decisions. At the same time, I allow the freedom come out myself. It's kind of fighting myself with free of be one person, but at the same time, my sensitivities has been so aware what I'm doing in texture, in balance, in lines, all the contrast, rhythms. Those are the focus point of my brain. At the same time, my spirit has to be in the same feelings and loud to continue. I usually spend a lot of time in the studio alone to finish one piece.
Some of the paintings, as I scroll through, some of them are sort of more. There's more pigment to them. There's more paint. There's more brush stroke. There's more movement on the canvas. And just to let you know, they're all on linen or canvas, and they're large scroll pieces that are stretched and nailed directly to the wall. They're not stretched on a stretcher form. And I think the way that they're presented and the way that they're created is really important to that, in the sense that it gives you as the artist the flexibility to sort of work on multiple planes, whether you did it on the floor, you start on the floor versus you start on the wall. And do you work between the two? Do you work between the two planes? Do you see it differently in the sense that, say, when you're going back to choreographing a piece, you're thinking about the floor versus you're at the plane changes to the wall, to the other surface?
Yes, I think it has to do with how your energy touches the canvas. Because once you're lying down on the floor, you could actually full body involve more, like a dance floor, or you can let your body have more control to make a big brush strokes, or using some big fluidity of movements in the texture. But sometimes once you want to see, I also do on the wall as well. Sometimes take down and by both, because the context between me and the canvas, they involve the gravity, involve all the, and how I go through my movement in horizontally or just lying down the floor, that changes the outcome of my context with the painting.
No, with this specific...
Can I just interject?
Absolutely.
I mean, the pictures that we're looking at are good, but the paintings themselves are great. And it's really worth a trip to the MDC Museum if you haven't been, because they're all about scale and they're all about texture and, you know, how you can actually sort of feel, you know, sort of the gesture and the mark making and the gravity. And I don't know that all of that can come through in a slide. No,
it never does. And I think, too, that's really what we wanted to talk about today, and why we really, in the sense that we're here, is we really, as curators, we firmly believe in this sort of transitional moment in Shen Wei's career, but also as Shen Wei as the painter. The amount of depth and the amount of emotive qualities and the just the sheer ability of the artist really does resonate on the painting itself. And one thing that I always sort of draw back with or understand about these paintings themselves is that they really do hinge on a level of risk. They really do hinge on this sort of pivotal point, much like within reflecting his own career. And that, you know, in any teetering of a direction, they will either, you know, they just don't work. And that's really, again, sort of the testament to saying that seeing these in person and having the ability, in a sense, to experience his other performative works, it's really about that one-on-one human connection, which, as we have this sort of technical revolution that's continually infiltrating our lives, we're understanding less and less really about these sort of visual attributes that you can only see through the physical body. I think, you know, going into it and being, we're all, you know, the three curators on the stage are coming from very sort of diverse perspectives here. And maybe, Karin, you could open up, you know, with Karin having the sort of first relationship with the paintings themselves, maybe you could talk a little bit about what was that sort of point for you in which, you know, you really, you know, wanted to get further within the work and really sort of started putting the exhibition together at the Crow Collection.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was really interested in Shen Wei's work because it's so diverse. So there's, you know, over the course of your career, there have been a lot of different styles, a lot of different media, and there's, you know, a very unclear boundary between performative work and, you know, you can kind of see the way the piece at the Met was very much about sort of living tableau, you know, that it wasn't just about being a dance piece or it wasn't just about being, you know, a visual art piece in the museum, but it was very much sort of creating a new kind of relationship that blurs the lines and it takes, you know, the focus sort of into the sculptures and into the dancers, and it's a very sort of complex operation. So I was familiar with a lot of your different stages of painting, and when I got to see this new series in the studio, it really seemed like a very refreshing and very sort of daring sort of step into a new direction, which isn't surprising because every other sort of phase has been a very sort of unique direction, and that I really admire the way that none of the work sort of resembles previous work, that it's very much about going to a new place and sort of finding a new challenge.
From a painting perspective, let's just talk specifically about the painting. From a painting perspective, looking at, and Karin has a PhD from MIT in contemporary Asian art, in your thesis. From that perspective, what stands out for both Shen Wei as a contemporary painter, but also to looking at a historical perspective?
I mean, I spend a lot of time looking at modern and contemporary art, you know, from Asia and specifically from China, and sort of finding deep historical roots and specifically, you know, conceptual connections to, you know, very long-standing traditions, whether it's, you know, calligraphy or ink painting or philosophy or poetry. And for me, I absolutely love the way, you know, this series especially, you know, is in conversation with that, but it's very implicit. It's not sort of overwrought, and that it's being sort of executed in this very, you know, sort of Western gestural, you know, sort of conversation with abstract expressionism and with, you know, sort of everything that that has informed sort of the career that you've had in New York. It's very much about your identity as an individual and not as a member of a generation and not as sort of a inheritor of a specific lineage, that it's very much about sort of taking all of these sources and sort of and generating something new. And I think it's just, for me, absolutely wonderful to see how much you have in dialogue with, you know, traditions like landscape and ink, but that it's being rendered in this scale that, you know, in a lot of ways this is like a very interesting translation, is, you know, the traditional, you know, formats of a hand scroll or a hanging scroll are very much all about a very personal interaction with a small work of art that maybe one person can have at a time, or a small group of people, and the fact that there are some of these same sort of feelings that are being translated into this really gigantic scale is wonderfully sort of different.
I think what was interesting too for me as I was sort of working with Shen Wei and sort of discussing, and one thing that Shen Wei talks about is place really plays a large role in this work, for me specifically. And, you know, a lot of times you can draw the ABX movement, you can talk about Franz Klein and sort of that whole homage to New York and that graphic quality, that harsh contrast. And I mean, was that conscious as you were sort of proceeding through this? I mean, because you reduced the color palette. I mean, there's no color whatsoever. It literally is a black, white, and gray color palette. So what was sort of your thought process? Does it relate to place? Does it, or how did you come to that point?
Actually, every single piece starting, I have no landscape in my mind. And also, more is how much I can be so concentrate and be aware about space. And I can't just play each brush or each paint on the canvas. I constantly to aware what's the relationships, what I'm put on, what's the outcome of the relationships, what's the conversation between those relationships, and also in structural way, in contrast way, in quality, in texture, in rhythms, in depths or emotions and movements. And all the things is the one I'm already concentrate about. In the end, somehow that leads to something. I felt there is another emotion behind the whole and outcomes. And that is the feeling I have during that period of making this work. That's the period of my emotion, of my spiritual and level. That turns out the whole piece being in that kind of feelings. And but my focus actually is not thinking about any landscapes or any other things. It's all about each element on the canvas, how it's working with another, and how interesting related to each other, how things are having lots of details, interesting thoughts in between.
I think it's interesting too, and Weng Ling, I'm going to bring you in here, because Karin and I, obviously being sort of brought up in the same sort of generation, and we're both studied at universities in the United States, and I want to bring Weng Ling into this conversation, given that you've had this ability to really shape the contemporary art world in China through the Beijing Center for the Arts and through some of your previous organizations, and you've had the abilities to work with some of the best contemporary artists working today, and you've seen their careers sort of rise, through your tutelage. How does Shen Wei, the painter, sort of fit within that conversation? How does he sort of is it on the same level? How does that fit?
For me, I think artists, not just Shen Wei, you always try to do something beyond boundaries, beyond the icons. That's how 2007, I brought a big Chinese contemporary art show to Miami and the design district with 9 artists, Gu Dexing, 曾梵志、汪建伟, Liu Wei. So the biggest collector, Uli Sik, is here. So that show actually with 9 very strong artists. So I know Shen Wei since 1980s. So yesterday I talked about this. If for me I say Shen Wei is a great artist, you don't need to trust me because I really is good friend. But very honest, I always whenever I come to New York, I spend time with Shen Wei, and I always see what he's doing. And when he has performance anywhere, Armory, New York, or Italy, or Beijing, anywhere. So I really like a good friend, and I always go somewhere to see his art. So also, he was a painter when I know him. I met him as a painter when he was 18 years old. So of course, Shen Wei had learned more than painting before. He studied traditional Chinese opera. He studied painting, and he studied, of course, he's a dancer. He became one of the top choreographers of the world. During these 20 years, he really developed himself as the greatest artist of the world now. But I'm actually very conservative people. When I say art, when I say the artist painting, I was always very quiet. I don't, encourage much. So for many years, I was watching what is Shen Wei doing, what he's painting on the canvas or on papers. Till this year, early this year, winter time, it was big snowing, and Shen Wei invited me and my best girlfriend, Daniela, to visit his studio in
New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah. So I was very shocked, impressed by his new works. And seriously, even as good friends, I always see his painting. But still, I feel this time, he really did something so cool, beyond what he had done before. So, yeah, I always working for the contemporary art, mostly Chinese, and also, beyond the boundaries, we love too many things at this age. So I see Shen Wei's art, really, it's one kind of artist. They lead us to somewhere beyond our imagination. So romantic. So, and you don't really see he's a Chinese artist or a Western artist. And this kind of painting, for me, I feel if you forever time on the canvas or on the paper, you could never done. Because so much energy and so much movements in this kind of paintings. So that's make me really, shocked. However, I wanted to thank these two curators, or congratulated, because Shen Wei, as a painter, he actually was not so well known as a performance artist. So for them, visit his studio from these 2 years and could do big exhibitions already. So I feel really, appreciated for this. And so that's how I think. I think of Shen Wei's this series of paintings, it's for me almost perfect.
They really are, and I guess this is another posed question for both of you, in the sense that Shen Wei is almost a triple threat, and does that work against him in his sort of career as a visual artist, because he's so successful in choreography, he's so good at what he does, and with this new body of painting, you know, the art world has this ability to where we sort of put them in categories. And with Shen Wei, you can't categorize him. So do you think in any way that's why he hasn't had the recognition thus far, or?
I think as a creative people, whatever artist or space director, whatever, we always need to challenge ourselves. And Shen Wei, I think he's very open to the nature, to the genre of the life, and also to the inside of his own. So I think also everybody here, we're trying to always challenge ourselves. And Shen Wei's performance artist career already so well known. So why we want to worry about as a painter if he's successful or not? I think it's mostly is you do what's really from your inside and you want to bring out. So, and also actually, as a friend, I really see how open Shen Wei to the, not just doing abstraction works like this. Last month, I had a big exhibition about the Beijing East area's city plan project. And I called Shen Wei. I said, Shen Wei, maybe you're not interested about to join this kind of city plan architecture project. But however, for me, what city should like is the best plan, the best art, but most important, the contents. But I think you as a people, your team is really the best company to show us how a future city life should be like. Of course, very abstraction like these paintings. Then Shen Wei bring his team to our opening performance. That was really amazing project they've done. So I really see as artist, beyond your success, beyond any boundary, that's so cool, and what Shen Wei already showed to us.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed that I had the opportunity to show Shen Wei's paintings just as paintings, and you know, we did host Shen Wei Dance Arts in Dallas, but it was at a different venue. So it was down the street at the AT&T Performing Arts Center. So the exhibition and the dance company sort of got to live in adjacent but separate realms, which I think was kind of nice to allow the paintings to sort of have their own identity. But then it's also pretty fantastic, you know, at the MDC Museum, the way the performances are integrated into the gallery space now, because, you know, what ends up happening, which is, again, it's a fairly complicated operation, but, you know, people are there and they're very fully engaged with the paintings, and then this sort of transformation happens when the dancers enter the space, and so the paintings sort of, you know, recede a little bit, and, you know, they're in dialogue with the dancers, and there is, you know, actual movement throughout the different galleries, and then after the performance concludes, it's like the paintings come back into almost sharper focus, and it's this really interesting sort of effect that, you know, the paintings themselves, I think, actually reveal a lot more after having had this interaction. So, you know, of course, it's you know, infinitely more complicated to incorporate both, as you know.
Absolutely.
But it's a really interesting challenge, and it's one that I think, you know, as curators, I appreciate when an artist is sort of not content to be in any one category, and that it creates this challenge.
I think that was one of the most sort of gratifying and sort of interesting things about putting the project together, is you did have this artist that would allow you to sort of engage in these multiple mediums, and I think you bring up a really good point, because whenever somebody asked me what the performance was going to look like, I said, well, I can't really explain it to you, but you just have to know it's going to unfold around you, and that the sense that this is not an audience and seated, you know, on a stage situation. This is something where you're going to have to experience. And I can't tell you how you're going to feel or what it's going to encompass, because even at that point, I had no idea what the choreography was going to be. But it is true in the sense that you really do have this sort of double visual relationship. If you've had the chance to experience his choreographed pieces in the past, they really are just living drawings, and they just really come down to sort of these very sort of fundamental aspects of looking at how we create images and how we create art in general. And I guess again, these images also sort of show the scale of really how immense these pictures are, these paintings are, and really how that one-to-one personal relationship is so important to experiencing, an artist's true work. And I guess going into sort of, Untitled number 12, how, I guess from your aspect of it in creating, an all-encompassing project, how important was this choreographed piece in relation to this series of paintings?
I have the 11 large-scale paintings. I think it's a big challenge for me because when I'm making all those paintings, was alone and was trying to, never thinking about it. I'm gonna make the same kind of subject or in dance, and because I feel my paintings is just like a personal journal, and I never think to, put everybody or the dancers to my journal and to share what I should, I feel how I want to write this journal with another human bodies. Never thinking about it. Later on, when I started working on this project, I said, okay, I'm going to make a dance piece, but in the same way how I make my painting. And this is the Untitled number 12, which means the last piece of the series. I actually just use my dances is the same way how I use how I'm facing a canvas. Discovering the same interesting things I'm discovering on the canvas. In each dancers, how the movement, how the energy, how the directions, how the compositions, and related to each other, how the whole thing become one, in what kind of sense, emotionally or physically, and or visually. And those is just like one of my painting, but with human bodies and life, and the happening in 20 to 3 minutes, and then I'll stay there forever. I like that experience because I think you brought to, in the end is I want to communicate with audience, with people who come to see my painting. That is the same kind of sensitivities. If you see the painting, when you see this performance, that have the same kind of sensitivity you can get from the painting or the performance. But also with live human bodies, and that also have a different kind of relationship between you physically and with the dancers. They may have another kind of communications different than you see, what you feel, you see from the painting. And there's a physical communication between audience and dancers. That is something I thought is interesting to allow people to experience.
And I think it's interesting as sort of museums, sort of have to adapt and change to sort of how audiences participate. And this is one way that I think, where I think what's so powerful about this series of work and what's so powerful about this project is I think this is one way that artists will start to explore and engage more and more as we proceed forward. And you're sort of already on the cusp of this point, and you're moving past it. And also too, what's interesting amongst a sort of or a sort of fair like Art Basel and sort of all the events that happen around it is really, that idea of really looking at deep inflection into a space, but also just something that's so experiential that ultimately at the end really comes down to the root of what you're looking at, which in the end is the paintings themselves. As you proceed, now that you've sort of had this experience and you sort of have been able to sort of see an audience interaction and how the mechanics of this sort of project works, how do you see this progressing? Do you see these paintings continuing? Is there another project? How does this proceed for you in this way?
I will still continue in this direction and want to even discovering more and to continue to develop more, see how I can, this series actually, when I starting, actually, I found this direction was since 2010, and but this is the most of the work is from the last 2 years. But this since 2010 to now is 4 years now. I'm still really into what I'm working on, and I still feel there's so much interesting things I could discovering. Definitely, I will keep going this as something I'm really passionate about.
I think we have time to open it up to a few questions from the audience. Do we have any questions?
I create sculpture, and in my sculpture I paint. And I'd like to hear about the spiritual aspect, because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, who made that? Do you have a similar experience when you're painting and you kind of like find yourself in this very strange zone?
Yes, especially this serious work, when I finished, I feel like I kind of surprised myself. And even now I still look at my work. I say, how I went to that, how it happened. Maybe right now I'm in the different zone. When I'm working, I'm really sensitive, that kind of zone, then things come out. And even I look at myself, look at the work, I say, I always think, maybe I cannot make this work anymore. I think, that's some, I think sometimes I have to, train myself to that level for sensitivity, and I will more feel comfortable. Say, okay, maybe I can make it work again. Yeah, I do have a lot of surprise every time I see it.
Same here.
Thanks.
Do you, in the sense, thinking about, and we'll continue. Sorry, as we. When you make work, and one thing that we had another conversation yesterday, when you make work, you talk a lot about the idea that as a choreographer, you work with people, you work with bodies, you work with energies, and as a solitary painter, you work so solitary in the studio. Do you ever see the studio aspect parlaying into sort of the idea of the production, or is your hand so important to you creating the work in the sense that it has to come from your authorship? No, in the painting production, as your studio practice, do you see yourself having a studio at some point where you have a lot of studio attendants doing the work for you, and it's more of an orchestrated thing?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I always tell my painting is so personal. I really I will buy all the paint myself. I will bring everything lying down myself. I don't need any, even this huge large scale canvas. I must paint every paint by myself to hang it. And I somehow, it just says like your journal. I want myself have my energy, my touch, my every decisions from myself to make on the canvas that have that really deep connections with myself. I don't think anybody, I don't even allow my assistant come into my room during my process. I don't want anybody to see my work. And I don't want any music. I don't want anybody to lock my doors. And I don't think I can allow anybody to help me to paint or doing things. Yeah, I think my work is so important. I think every brush stroke is my chi, my energy, my touch. It's from my personal, it's really personal connections. And I know how each stroke I paint with what kind of motion or what kind of concentration by my body or by my brush stroke or by any movements. And that connection is mostly the soul of my painting. I don't think if I don't have that, I don't know how I can be really to make that happen with somebody else.
Well, I want to congratulate you. I went yesterday to see your performance, and I was absolutely impressed. And I'm very glad that you don't have assistants, and you try to keep your chi on your paintings, because you actually absolutely share it with us. It was amazing. And when I see your choreography, I see a painting. When I see your painting, I see a choreography. And I'm even scared you're going to start composing music, because I think I see music on your paintings. So you never know. Maybe that's your next challenge. Thank you very much for your art. It really deeply impressed me. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, it is a lot of music in my painting because talking about rhythms and times. And that all us we doing in as a composer is about a composition of rhythms and times in space. Definitely there is a lot of time in it, in the movements. Yeah, I'm so thank you. You know, enjoy and understand the musical part of my work. Thanks. And I paint in silence. I have to be super concentrated. I don't want any noise around. And then I can be fully communicate with what's happening in that second.
Question over here.
It's good to see you, Shen Wei.
Thank you.
Wanted to ask, given the fact that you're very personally involved, do you become very attached to the outcome? And once you present the piece, don't you feel very vulnerable? How it would be perceived from exterior point of view, from other people? Because it's so deeply personal.
Yes, so right. I was so vulnerable, I felt. Especially I'm making the 12th painting with my dancers. The 12th work is the dance piece. And I have to emotionally and to prepare myself. I have to talk to my dancers and say, that's so personal. I usually don't like people into my personal zone because it's everything in my soul. I have to be open to other people. And also my painting. I also feel that's so fragile hanging there because I just feel when people seeing it as a, wow, it's like I'm completely naked hanging here. And that's some, yeah, you definitely got me that part. I was prepared a long time to let this happen.
I'd like to add that, I mean, I think it's really interesting that there's this tension because, you know, they're very personal works and it's also, you know, very, you know, developed in sort of solitude over a long period of time. But you've also, I think, invested a lot of generosity in terms of I've seen you, you know, with other people looking at the work, and you love to see what other people find in it. And there's a lot of autonomy. It's sort of that, you know, these things have been created, and it was, you know, very personal. But that you also see how it can become very personal for any number of people coming from a very different point of view, and that's just a really wonderful sort of duality.
Yeah, you're so right. Because it's so personal to me. This is how my process is being made. But I also found out a lot of audience who saw the painting, they have personal connections. I said, so funny, one day, one of a lady who saw the work, she said, it reminds me I was living when I was little, and what I have that place I always visit. I'm so scared to be that place, but I'm so attached to that place. That place I was inside my deep myself. When I see those paintings, the feelings comes to her back. That she has the personal connection, but she never talked to people. And I felt like, oh my goodness, all the secrets in those paintings, in every single audience who have that communication between the artwork, that somehow just brought me and said, oh, actually they have secrets too. I was in the interesting feel that it's so personal actually. It looks like it's so, everybody can look at it so abstract, but somehow when you see it, you have personal feelings with the work. And also some people tell me that they see animals, see human bodies, they see a lot of emotional connections. They say, oh, I don't see that. Can you show me what you're talking about? And sometimes I find out that so many people have that kind of a way to connect with them and somehow give me another story, behind what I have. That's an interesting part of that part, actually.
Actually, I have an artist. He lives in American, but he's a water ink artist, Li Huayi. He described about ink art and oil on canvas. He said the Western paintings, for me, is like the sun. And the water ink, for him, is like the moon. So for me, I say some with this kind of paintings, I say both, the sun and the moon.
Thank you.
Yep, we have another question here.
This is my first time to Basel art. So when I see Shen Wei's work, It feels so unique and so overwhelming. As a dancer and as a photographer, so your works really give us very spiritual words. Feel so touched. So it's really talented. We have a question after this exhibition. So when is your next exhibition? Are you planning to go back to China or to show your wonderful work to Chinese people?
And I have, you may know, I'm the person never plans. I don't plan, and I always live in the moment all the time. And I even, sometimes, I even don't know in 5 years my life or 2 years. I don't, only if there's a scheduling things I have to do. Usually I don't plan it because I like the moment to make a fool of this moment as I can and being focused on the moment. Yes, I have no plan for the next exhibition. And even this one, I didn't plan for a long time, and this happened. Of course, if in the future we have, the right place and the right people to communicate, to do exhibition in China, of course, I would like to share my work to not just China and Chinese audience, but I'd love to share with this for anybody who can have their own secrets with my paintings. And I think, even I feel so vulnerable, and at the same time, it's nice to have everybody have that deep communication with my work. We're looking forward to the future for the work being shown around the world and China. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I want to thank my panelists, Karin, Shen Wei, and Ling. Just to let you know that the museum does have one more performance tomorrow at 1 p.m. that if you haven't had the opportunity to experience the choreography and the painting together, it is the MDC Museum of Art and Design in downtown Miami. The exhibition will be on view through February 1st, so there are additional opportunities to experience the magnitude of the work. So I would like to thank Art Basel for this opportunity, and thank you, Shen Wei. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.